Welcome to Real Estate Coaching Radio, starring award-winning real estate coaches and #1 international best-selling authors, Tim and Julie Harris. This is the #1 daily radio show for realtors looking for a no BS, authentic, real-time coaching experience. What's really working in today's market, how to generate more leads, make more money, and have more time for what you love in your life. And now your hosts, Tim and Julie Harris.
I have to say, Julie, this metaverse conversation, not only is it making me a little, feel a little weird.
Yeah, me too.
But so is some of our podcast listeners, because this is seemingly, we're talking about a combination of woo-woo meets science fiction, meets The Matrix, meets a little bit of Star Trek.
There's a lot mixed into this stuff, right?
Yeah, but the thing is it's very easy just to stay closed-minded to things like this as they start to emerge, and you miss the opportunity, or you at least are having to fight against the momentum that's moving towards this advancement in technology. Yesterday's podcast, where we talked about the different phases of the internet, I do clearly remember where people were resisting the internet, where they didn't get the concept of it.
Of course.
You know, I think it was national news outlets and whatnot were just joking at the idea that, you know, people would buy things online and all these questions and all this other stuff. And I remember when, you know, even the social networks started to come online. I remember your sister actually told us about Facebook, because Facebook started out being strictly from, you know, at universities and all the rest of it. And of course, people resisted it. Why would you put all your information on? I mean, so the point is this stuff is coming no matter what. And this metaverse really is the congealing, is that the right word? Congealing of all these previous technologies. It's or call it a technology, but it's combining, social networking. It's combining essentially what it effectively is, you know, the internet on a whole. All of it's going to be essentially in one place on the metaverse. It's going to be
an evolution, really.
It is. It really is an evolution. It's a reorganization in such a way that I think very quickly people will adopt to it. Versus, well, and now I'm going to go to this site. I'm going to go to this site. I'm going to go to this site. And something we didn't talk about yesterday, and frankly, I'm just really looking forward to telling them about all the different ways you're going to interact with the metaverse, because that's where it kind of gets fun. Yeah. But one of the things we've talked about on our pod before was all these wearable devices that are coming out, Apple Glass and all the rest of it. And if you guys don't know what I'm talking about, just Google Apple Glass. Essentially, they're wearable glasses that just like I said, just Google it or go to our podcast and listen to the past podcasts we did on that technology. But the interaction that people will have on the metaverse isn't just necessarily going to be when they're wearing their, you know, VR headset, wearing their haptic suits, and they're in their homes or wherever they're going to be. There are going to be differing levels of involvement in the metaverse, just like there is with the internet. But this is definitely where it's going. Yes. And right now, if you want to meet people, like you might go to the gym, you might go to the town center, you might go to the mall, you might go to the local restaurant. You know, when you want to socialize with people, you go to physical locations, and that interaction, you know, is something that all of us as humans need, right? Well, what if all of a sudden you can go online in the metaverse and have that same, you know, need satisfied? And that's what's going to happen. That is what's happening. And that's the reason social networking works fundamentally, because it keeps you connected with other humans.
Yes, that's right. And I was thinking about, you know, we're trying to understand this all together, and we're making some analogies. You know, what's the real world? What's the metaverse? How do you cross that bridge? And I was thinking about the evolution of Web 1.0, 2.0, 3.0. And I was thinking about the fact that we call email, right? So before email was there, we all knew what mail was, right? So we made that analogy. Well, email is just like mail. It's just electronic mail. Then it became email. You know, why is this called a pod? Because the original Apple iPod started, I think, all of that ages ago.
I actually don't know why they call them podcasts.
I think that's why, but we have all of these things in our vocabulary, and a lot of them are bridges from what we used to know to what's happening now, and this is no different than that.
So to your point, maybe what's going to happen is we're not going to refer it to the internet. Like we were pointing out, when the internet first came online, people were calling it cyberspace and all these other terms that are obsolete now. So maybe the fact is the term metaverse is going to replace all these previously.
Sure.
And
or it could transform to something else too. We're all sort of trying to make those bridges of how we even talk about this.
Right. And what's going to happen then if you're like, okay, I met so-and-so, but I don't remember if I actually met them when I was in the line at Starbucks, as in the real life.
Yeah, that's gonna be weird.
Or whether I was actually, you know, in the metaverse someplace. You won't. What happens then when because it won't matter really at the end of the day.
Unless their avatar looks a lot different than them in real life, then it might be kind of confusing.
Well, you and I were having fun yesterday talking about, and we're going to talk about this on the next show, but we're going to get to some more meat and potatoes of the metaverse today. But we were talking about, like, how do laws work? can people get assaulted in the metaverse? Yes, they can.
Yes, actually, I've been researching that for probably Monday or Tuesday's pod. And there's a lot of that that's evolving as well, and how AI is learning what's moral and what's not, what should be allowed and what's not.
Great.
And I'll talk about that more on a future podcast. But one of the things that they point out is that we as humans live in this world that laws have been based on that continued history, right? So certain laws are in place because something happened, because there was a war that caused this to be legislated against or whatever. Okay, so how does an AI have that same perspective? And so now what they're doing is they're testing AIs to see, they'll throw questions out and see what does it bounce back. And often, I think it's something like close to 90% of the time it is accurate as to, it'll say like, well, that's wrong. But when you make it a more complicated situation, like a situation about morality, or maybe it could go this way, maybe it could go that way, that's where AI loses it a little bit.
I was just thinking 90% success rate when you're coming in that scenario really sucks. I mean, would you fly in a plane if basically 90% of the time you're going to get there?
Exactly.
So, by the way, this is Metaverse Explained for Real Estate Agents, and this is part two. So go ahead, Julie.
All right. So we're starting on point 3. So remember to get caught up as of yesterday if you're just joining us. So point number 3, is the metaverse real? It's a simulation where you appear as a cartoon-like avatar of yourself. I know it sounds crazy, right? But let's just say, I think most people know what an avatar is. It's a representation of yourself. However, over the next few years, technology will move past people appearing as avatars to more like one-on-one simulations, one-to-one simulations. Looking at a person in the metaverse will be almost the same as they appear offline. And then when plugged into the metaverse, things will look and feel very much like real life. Very soon, it's reasonable to assume that some people will prefer to spend their lives in the metaverse versus real life. And when I was reading your notes on this, I was thinking about how like cartoons used to look, and now when you look at like a Pixar movie, and it's so vivid, it's almost, it's just so crisp, and it's so much better. And I think the metaverse and the avatar situation is going to be more like that.
So that's where most people are going to get stuck. They're going to take one look at the metaverse. They're going to see these cartoon-like avatars, and they're going to say, this is a joke.
Not
Why would
for
I ever
me.
consider that? Right. But what's happening is, in video game, frankly, technology is leading the way. They've created new code and software and all the rest of it. And again, you can go on YouTube and you can pull up videos where you will watch a video and you will swear it's somebody videotaping, like as they walk down the street, videotaping off their iPhone, but it's all simulated. And then you'll see a simulated person walk by and you cannot tell the difference. They've gotten to the point, well, here,
It's really good.
Let me just make this kind of summarizes it all. Most movies that you see 5 years ago, you could tell when you were watching something that was done by CGI. CGI is old technology compared to what essentially has evolved out of CGI. Now, most movies that you watch, sometimes as much as 50% or more, is a complete simulation. And you can't tell.
No, you can't tell. And you know how you really notice this is for Star Wars fans looking at Star Wars now versus like even not even the original 1970s ones, but you can literally see that movie technology evolve.
But you touched on something. Carrie Fisher passed away, but Carrie Fisher was in the latest Star Wars.
Yes.
And so what's going to happen again? This goes back to the creepy part of all this, but again, and let's get to point number 4.
Sure.
But actors and you and everyone else are going to have AI simulations of themselves that are going to be able to exist in the metaverse and hypothetically represent you in the metaverse. I know it's wacky, but I just gave you an example. And so other actors are now able to, when they're signing, so I have a coaching client who works with a lot of famous actors in LA, and he and I often talk about some of the things he talks about with his clients. And one of the things that I know are coming into the contracts that some of these actors are signing is, they're signing an agreement to do a series of movies or whatever, but they're also signing away their rights or in negotiating point for their rights to allow the production studio to create simulations in the forms of video games and other thing of that same actor. So if the movie's a hit, they're going to want to create a video game and they're going to create other media. Well, the actor's not going to be required to go and act in those particular, spin-off productions. They have technology that's going to make it so that it looks like they're acting. It's their voice. So there's AI right now that if it listens to you talk enough, you guys know this. This is all things you shouldn't be surprised about. but it can listen to you. It'll pick up your parlance. It'll pick up your rate of speed of how you talk.
Speech.
It'll pick up
Yeah.
if you stutter here and there. Like it'll pick up when Julie says, yeah, or whatever she says sometimes. What is it you say? Okay, right? It'll pick up all those little foibles. We all have them in our voices. And it'll be indistinguishable. Now, does that mean you can have your AI get really, really kick-ass at prospecting for you?
You know that was their first thought.
Well, that's my first thought.
know,
and
right?
the answer is probably yes.
Possibly.
Yeah. So realistically, you're going to be able to have now. How is this going to? What effect will this have on society? What effect will this have? You're going to hypothetically in the metaverse be able to have AI bots that are going to allow you to truly duplicate yourself to the point where you can, who knows what you can actually do. This is all, again, this is ahead of my skis.
Yeah, but not so much, because if you think about it, aren't when you go to buy something online and you have a question about that store, those automatic chats that pop up, at least 50% of the answers are already preloaded. They're reading, they are backfilling that with the information. That doesn't have to be a live person anymore.
More practical.
We see it all the time.
Well, how about this? On Google, on my Gmail, I don't know if you have this turned on,
Yeah.
but it will do predictive things at what you're going to say based
and it's
on
pretty
the
good.
And it's pretty damn good. So when I think it's an option on your Gmail, you can just toggle it on, and what it'll do is as you're typing, it'll actually finish the sentence based on how you'd written in the past, and it sounds exactly like you'd have written it yourself. But after you've used it for long enough, it goes from filling in simple words or 2 words, it'll go into putting in sentences. And what's that? Grammarly.
Yes.
Grammarly is basically AI, and it's doing the same thing. So you guys are interacting with AI. AI is learning how you write, learning how you think, basically, and it's going to simulate you. Now, that's going to carry through to the metaverse. Again, I don't want to get too far
that's
out
okay.
of our
Let's
screen.
do point number 4.
So the 5 biggest metaverses as of today. Oh, point number 4, right. So point number 4 is how many metaverses are there? It appears that there are many, but over time, it only makes sense there will be fewer as the market decides which metaverses are the winners. And in our opinion, the winners of the metaverse battle, right? Who will be create the dominant metaverses? Will be the companies that have the dominant social networking sites. And Julie and I were thinking, well, why wouldn't Facebook have the ultimate metaverse? And they probably will. Facebook and Google, we think, will have the ultimate metaverse. And Facebook obviously they're believing that that's the journey that they're on, to the point where they renamed their company Meta, and they're spending $10 billion a year on developing the metaverse. Now, here's something that's really cool for just normal people like all of us. Virbela, which is owned by EXPI, the holding company that owns eXp Realty, already has a fully functional metaverse called eXp World. And eXp World is the future of business. eXp World, or Virbela, or the metaverse, isn't just it's the future of business, but many aspects of society will coexist with real life, and in some cases will essentially spend people are going to get to the point where they spend most of their waking hours in the metaverse. There's no doubt about it. Remote workers, kids in school, things like that. And if there's no real discernible, or if it's a 95% of the experience, like if you go there, it's not quite the same as real life, but it's close enough. People are going to prefer close enough to going through the hassle of driving someplace, or dealing with COVID, or just whatever it is, right? You guys get the point? So EXP actually has that technology now, and if you want to be part of what's next, not just for frankly civilization, that's a bold statement, but it's probably true, but certainly real estate, please do consider joining eXp Realty and selecting Julie and I as your sponsor. And if you'd like to talk with Julie and I about being your sponsor at eXp Realty, feel free to text me directly at 512-758-0206, 512-758-0206. So if you're ready to join eXp and you've not yet chosen your sponsor, please do consider Julie and I, 512-758-0206. And now if you're just getting ready to get started to look into eXp, we've made it easy for you to learn more about it. Just text the letters EXP to 47372.
Yes.
Text EXP to 47372, and then you'll be taken to a site where you'll have all your questions answered. There's videos and all this other stuff on why so many agents, fastest growing real estate companies, certainly of our lifetimes. 73,000 agents, probably going to be more like 150,000 agents, 500,000 agents. That's what's projected within 5 years. Biggest real estate company on planet Earth will exist inside the metaverse, called Virbela. So if you're interested in learning more, just text EXP to 47372. And remember, message and data rates apply. So the top 5 metaverses as of today. And no, I've never been in any of these. Have you, Julie?
I don't think so.
You've never been to Starltoken?
I've heard of the first 2.
Okay.
Yeah.
Decentralized Land,
Decentraland.
Decentraland. Go ahead.
Number 2 is Sandbox. Number 3 is Axie Infinity. That's AXIE. And then number 4 is Cryptovoxels. And number 5 is Starltoken, which I had never heard of. I thought that might be a typo with the L in the middle, but it's Starltoken.
I checked it many times.
Yes, exactly. So remember that there are multiple metaverses. We just gave you the top 5 so you can start becoming familiar when you hear people talk about, for example, Decentraland, you'll know that is a metaverse.
The point I was trying to make before with my previous notes was the big players haven't even entered on the field, right? These are all...
Because Facebook isn't on there and Google isn't on there right now.
Right, because they're developing it. But it only makes sense these companies with so much money are going to buy some of these other platforms and essentially evolve them. That's obvious. That is what's going to happen. There's no doubt.
For sure.
So point number 5, Julie.
Point number 5, if there are many metaverses, will my avatar be able to go from one metaverse to another? So it's likely that the different emerging metaverses will allow you to have one avatar that works on different metaverse platforms. Conceptually, this would be like going from one country to another and only having to show your passport before entry versus having to become an entirely different person. Your avatar can look like you really look or an idealized version of you. Expect companies to emerge that will specialize in high-end avatar renderings. I can just hear us doing podcasts about upgrade everything. What's your avatar look like?
But that is what's going to happen. I mean, you're going to have so imagine this. Let's say at the end of the day, it's 5 years from now, because this stuff's going to happen maybe not even 5 years, within 3 years. This is what people are projecting, that you have multiple metaverses that you frequent every single day. Let's say you're smart and you join eXp Realty. So you're going to be part of Verbella. That'll be your work metaverse, let's say. And then let's say Facebook has theirs and Google has theirs. And let's just say those are the 3 places you go. Well, you're going to be able to, with just a toggle, go from one metaverse to the other, which is what I was trying to say with the passport, would make it so that you guys know when you go from one website to the other and you don't have to put in your credentials and you don't have to log in anymore. Just ask if you want to log in using Google or Facebook. Well, the same thing's going to happen. So your avatar will be able to live in multiple metaverses. Now, what does that mean? Sounds crazy, right? But it's no different, hypothetically, than if you were to go, let's just imagine where you guys live. You know, Julie and I lived in New Albany, Ohio, and nearby there was Gahanna, Ohio, and nearby there was, say, Worthington, Ohio. And each of these communities had their own central, their own city centers. They had their own shopping malls. They had their own real estate markets. They had every little community was slightly different than the other. The Netjo, the people that lived there, all the rest of it. Well, we obviously could drive from one place to the other and do real estate. So physically, in the physical world, that makes sense, right? You could go and drive across town 45 minutes and meet with someone in Worthington and have coffee there, have an exchange, get some referrals, do some deals, and then drive back home to New Albany. That's how it's going to work in the metaverse, in essence. You're going to be able to pop from one metaverse to the other, to the other, to the other. And in doing so, you're going to be able to do, and this is where it gets interesting, and this is where it's going to really boggle the brain, you're going to be able to do real estate transactions in the metaverse. You'll be able to do real real estate transactions in the metaverse using blockchain, which we're going to explain, I think. Let me look. On our next pod. Yep. Or you're going to be able to do, metaverse real estate transactions. Now, this is, again, seems crazy, but let me try to break this down so it seems simple. If you are in a metaverse, if you're essentially online and you're wearing your Oculus or whatever your VR headset is, and you're wearing your, full haptic suit, and you're you're walking on a street. And remember, the technology is going to make it so that it's an indistinguishable experience. We talked about this yesterday. With your haptic suit on, you're going to be able to feel the breeze blowing. The simulation will be just freakishly amazing. And again, this technology is here now. It's just not widespread, but it's going to be. So you're going to be able to go there, and you might find that when you're in that metaverse, there's a particular street that has a lot of other popular locations, just like real life. And let's say you want to open up a storefront there for your real estate business, where you're going to sell not just metaverse-based properties in the different metaverses, as in, remember the different communities analogy I gave you guys a second ago, but also offline real estate as well. So if people are spending most of their time in the metaverse, or even 20% of their time in the metaverse, and how much time do most people spend on Facebook? I mean, it's extraordinary. It is. And we rattled off the top 10 websites that people frequent. And, Facebook was right up there. I'm using that as an example because for many of you, based on what we know, the demographics of our podcast, most of you are on Facebook, and you will understand that analogy best. So if you're spending, let's say, an hour or maybe 2 hours a day on Facebook a day, however much time you're spending on there, Well, if you're able now to go, and that's mostly for just essentially screwing around time, if we're being honest. If all of a sudden you're able to go there and do business, if all of a sudden you're able to go there and actually create business and revenue and maybe do some grocery shopping, how about this? Why don't you go to a metaverse-based grocery store, do your grocery stores, throw them in the cart and check out, and then the groceries are delivered to your real-life door. That's how it's going to work.
That's right. And next to that online metaverse grocery store, maybe you have your real estate office where people can pop by and ask you questions about real estate.
That's right.
So that's where my mind goes with regards to making this practical and tactical for these guys.
Right. And there'll all be, obviously, Julie and I are not technologists, but there'll be all kinds of different ways that you can just imagine this is going to really bounce to the next level. But this is an opportunity. This is essentially like if humanity just discovered a new nearby planet, and now we're able to start inhabiting it, and we're essentially deciding who's going to be able to buy what and where. That is what's happening right now, and that's what's going to continue to happen. I don't think the real long-term winners have even, like I said, they're not even on the field yet. And when you see your kids that are so addicted to video games and they're so immersed in all these sort of really low res, really kind of, I would call it sketchy interfaces. The user experiences are really bad. When you see that, how many of you play games on your phones? You're right?
Yeah.
I mean, you're a grown-ass adult. How much time do you spend playing, what was that one, Candy Crush?
I know.
Yeah. I mean, I've seen people playing that that are our age and older.
Hey, I'm pretty sure I went about half blind playing Words with Friends for a while. I got a little bit addicted to that.
Yeah. Well, but there's that's maybe a little bit more of less of a video game and more,
but still,
Scrabble.
it doesn't have to be that polished for you to get attached to it.
Yeah. So this is where all this is going. And so how do you position yourself now? That's what we're going to talk about on our next podcast. But really what we're hoping you're going to take away from this is we don't want you to be obsolete in your outlook on life, and as technology and all these other things happen, we don't want you to essentially just be scared or intimidated. So Julie and I are giving you this as weird, bizarre information, as practical and tactical as we can. A lot of you are longtime listeners, this is easily the #1 listened to daily podcast for real estate agents in at least the United States. And many of you have been listening to us we picked up a ton of listeners when COVID hit. And one of the things that Julie and I were predicting, and many of you will remember this, is a renaissance that was going to be led, which was going to happen because, frankly, historically, renaissances of some version or another have always followed pandemics. And this is going back to the beginning of recorded history 3,000 years ago. There's always an explosion of creativity, in essence, an evolution, or that's not even the right word, but a progression, let's say, of civilization following a pandemic. And that's what's happening now. It's happening in every aspect of how people choose to live. And this metaverse thing is going to be something that's going to, I think, be the essentially the most significant change since really maybe even the printed word. I mean, that's crazy, right?
No,
maybe even the wheel.
And I think it's going to happen faster than previous ones have, too.
Sure.
Yeah, because I think people want it to. I think there's enough people working on it. I think the brain power that has stemmed from everybody being in lockdown for a long time is contributing to this. And just the ability just for the technology to deliver on it is different.
There'll be waves of hype and BS that happen. I mean,
always.
Well, as always. I mean, the .com crash that happened like 2000, that was a whole bunch of companies that were just rushing to the market of web, basically on the heels of Web 2.0, rushing to the market with these crazy ideas and how they're going to monetize things on the internet. Everyone's throwing money at it. Absolutely, that's going to happen with the metaverse too.
But that's part of the evolutionary process too.
Yep.
Stuff gets invented through that process, and other things get uninvented because it wasn't good enough. It didn't survive for a reason.
And that's where the winners really start to win too.
Sure.
That's when the market decides who. Facebook was part of a version of Web 2.0.
Remember MySpace?
Yeah, there's tons of them. They just became basically roadkill.
Right.
So all this is coming your way. Again, this series on the metaverse is supposed to mostly be something that causes you guys to maybe, if you're willing to expand your thinking, and maybe your stance on things like this before is being overly skeptical and just thinking it's just a farce and just the rest of it. And then years later, you realize you wish you would have basically not been so close-minded. So what we're trying to do is we're trying to open your mind to the possibilities so that you can be excited about it, because something magical happens when you rewire your brain to be less of a skeptic and more of an optimist, or at least more excited about the future. The actions you take today are different than the actions you otherwise would have taken. So let's say you hear this metaverse stuff and everyone's talking about it because they're going to. You just watch. And it's all over the news everywhere, and you're naturally a skeptic. That's just some fad that's going to go with the way of the, whatever. And then all of a sudden, 3 years from now, you're realizing essentially you missed the boat. You could have been, what other things other than the fact that you were slow to react? What other things did you also miss out on because you were keeping yourself small and the way that you looked at the possibilities? This is going to revolutionize healthcare. It's going to revolutionize how people are, learn things, how they travel.
Everything.
Everything.
Entertainment, education, how real estate is sold, how people find you, how you interact with people. I mean, it's pretty amazing. I was thinking in my mind an example of like just EXP's metaverse, EXP world, and how much more efficient it is. I had 2 reasons to be there last week. One was a referral to Mexico. Mm-hmm. Okay, so good luck. How long would that normally take you to find somebody competent in Mexico? Took about 5 minutes because EXP is in tons of countries. And then the other one was I had a question about commercial E&O insurance, which also would have previously taken me 16 phone calls, emails, waiting for people to call me back. You just go to the metaverse, you walk into that office, and you get your answer.
Well, here, think about
it's more
this.
efficient is my point.
So you're a classically trained musician, right? Mm-hmm. And there's not a lot of calls for classically trained musicians anymore. There aren't. There's not a lot of orchestras,
really.
The funding. It's not the
Especially
music.
After the pandemic.
Well, all that, right?
Yep.
So would this be a resurgence of classical music, hypothetically, right?
Hypothetically,
it could be, because
Sure.
people could all of a sudden, you don't have to have a whole bunch of money to create, a place where the whole thing, right? Mm-hmm. What made music, what makes orchestra music popular or not popular is the accessibility to it. Like, how many people would listen to it? How many people would love it if they listened to it?
That actually is a trend,
right.
Believe it or not. Millennials and Generation Z now, the younger than millennials, the percentages of them actually listening to and getting involved in classical music went through the roof during lockdown because the accessibility, to your point, went through the roof.
Well, so what if all of a sudden you can just go to your, I remember you and I used to watch you playing in orchestras in different places in the United States, and you'd walk in and the facility would be just ridiculously, ridiculous, expensive, insanely big. Awesome, amazing, right? All that. And then all those people up on stage and all the time that went into the practice, all the money, all the human all the rest. But what if all of a sudden it could exist on the metaverse?
Well, I mean, that's what happens when you and I present an EXP World, isn't it?
Yeah.
We're on stage, we're looking at the auditorium, we're seeing the avatar sitting in the stadium, and we know who they are because their name appears over their heads.
See, this is a good thing, guys.
Which I do think is pretty cool. I mean, you can
definitely
reach more people, you can have more variety of experience, and you don't necessarily have to leave your home to do it.
Exactly.
So
and, what if
introverts unite?
But if you and I can vamp on this forever because we love shit like this. But imagine, for example, there's always been a direct correlation between your environment and essentially the experience you have on planet Earth as a human, right?
Yes.
So your environment isn't just where you live, but that's a hell of a lot of it. It's also the people you're exposed to. So it's also everything. So your environment is where you physically are on the planet. And if you happen to have been born in a really unfortunate area, chances are you're never going to have any exposure to anything that's going to do anything but reinforce your belief that that's what reality is. Your reality will always be basically in the planet, in the environment in which you were born.
Yep.
What if you could pop into the metaverse of being the poorest soul on planet Earth, and you are born in the worst place you could possibly have chosen? There's no probability, the chances of you actually transcending out of that environment is about zero. But all of a sudden, because of the metaverse, this is essentially the dream of the internet, basically.
That plus things like Starlink making it able for you to actually find the metaverse.
Right.
But yes, absolutely.
And this makes it so that somebody who has the desire, it can then plug into the metaverse. Now, where are they going to get the equipment? Where are they going to get the, all the rest of it? I don't have answers for that.
Under development, I'm sure.
Under development. But this is what happens. And remember, again, all this stuff, all the wearables, when they come out, are going to be extremely expensive. But the prices were dropped. I remember when, a 42-inch plasma screen TV, they were 10 grand.
I know, they were so expensive.
And now you can get one from Costco, like they give it to you when you're checking out, like,
right.
Congratulations, you spent $100 on, whatever. We're going to give you a flat screen TV. Well, the same thing's going to happen with this stuff even faster, especially because This is going to be like, you think governments are pressing electric cars on people, right? You know, they're changing laws, changing tax incentives to get people to buy electric cars. You just wait. And when people start to realize the potential of what we're describing, you're going to see governments, you're going to see everything is going to get literally rewired, and rewired figuratively. School systems, just medical care, just everything. We keep on talking about the same things, but these are the things that are the most important for people, the quality of somebody's life, ultimately.
I agree with that. And, you know, I often have thought, well, are people going to become more isolated because you can do all this stuff from home? And one thing I learned with the kids being online for a lot of last year was that they actually ended up knowing each other better and having closer friendships because they saw each other online all the time. Like, I see Zoe's out with her friends. They know, like, their pets, and they had a discussion about this, how they liked virtual school better because they had bring your pet to school day.
Yeah.
Online, which you'd never do in real school. You're not going to bring your dog with you when you're in first grade, right? So they have like this different type of relationship that they were able to foster because they saw each other online from their home. So I think how people interact will change too.
So I know this is a step outside of our normal, conversation topic about real estate trading and coaching, but we're trying to expand your thinking, trying to make you excited and trying to make you optimistic. So then you will start taking different actions. Because the fact is if you're excited about your future, you're going to take different actions than if you are not excited about your future. And maybe this is a little spark in some of you that will cause you to go down the rabbit hole as we did and learn more about this. All right, we have 2 more shows on this topic, and we'll talk with you guys on the next show. Thank you, as always, for continuing to make this the #1 listened to podcast for real estate professionals in at least the United States. Have a fantastic day.